Hi, I'm Melanie, and I find it really difficult to tell people about what I do, my passions and interests, without telling them about the journey that I've been on to get there. This particular journey I'm going to share with you is important context to how and why I realized the power of using reflective drawing to unlock a deeper level of positionality. Each piece of this puzzle is a question rather than a solution, all leading to the next step and resulting in a more meaningful picture. I'm Sri Lankan and British. I was born in England after my parents migrated for better education and broader job opportunities. I spent 5 years growing up here in England before my father's job required us to move around a lot. And I mean a lot. We moved to Malaysia, then Sri Lanka, Jordan, Egypt, and India twice. So that's 6 moves, 7 schools in 13 years. Trust me, when I took being the new girl to a whole other level. When I look back on it now, I see my childhood travels as an immense privilege. I got to meet so many great people, experience different cultures, and eat so much great food. All of these life experiences has led me to where I am today. It's fueled my views, approaches, and perspectives. One consistent part of moving around a lot was attending international schools. And although many of these taught a British-based curriculum, my engagement with those subjects always had a global underpinning. After completing my schooling years in India, I chose to move country again. Woohoo, move number 7. I came back to England to study a BA in fine art. But soon after I started my course here, I noticed a change in my learning environment and curriculum, from quite a global one to a more local one. The realization that much of my undergraduate education was Eurocentric and quite difficult for me to relate to led me to my first puzzle piece, decoloniality. You see, I've always been intrigued by decolonization. Having lived in Sri Lanka, I learned about the country's colonial history. But what wasn't included in that curriculum was the lasting impacts of colonialism on knowledge production, cultural norms, and hierarchy, often perpetuating historic injustice. This puzzle piece, this realization, led me to learn more about the movement of decolonizing education. When I first started exploring what decolonizing education meant, it felt like that conversation had skipped straight to the targets and tick box solutions, often conflating the goals of diversity and inclusion work and conveniently bypassing the important yet difficult conversations on power, race, and hierarchies. This lack of meaningful dialogue highlighted just how much we all, including me, had to learn about what decolonizing education really means. This brought me to my second puzzle piece that prompted me to learn more. So I decided to do a master's, with my thesis focusing on exploring decolonizing education and its intersections with global learning. My aim with my research was not only to do research on what decolonizing education meant, but to be decolonial in my approach too, thinking critically about my intentions, ethics, and methods here. So, when developing the initial ideas behind that research, it was so clear to me that it was going to be shaped by my personal experiences, my thoughts, and my ideas. I was going to be creating the participant criteria, right? Conducting the interviews, coding and theming the qualitative data, and ultimately making conclusions. My conclusions. So, just like I said at the start of this talk, I find it really difficult to tell people about what I do, my passions and interests, without telling them about the journey that I've been on to get there. Similarly, I found it really difficult to do my qualitative research without being open and honest that my life experiences, identity and beliefs would have an impact on my thoughts, opinions, and views. After some digging, I came across the term positionality. It refers to how different social positions shape our identities and access in society. This was the third puzzle piece, one of those really good ones that start to make that puzzle look a little bit clearer and give you the boost of motivation to keep going. this was one of those puzzle pieces. This puzzle piece pushed me to think about how I was going to explore my positionality within my research. Another thing you should probably know about me is I'm pretty dyslexic, and I find comfort in writing my ideas and notes on paper. So to solve my question of how, I started with a mind map of my identity using words. The more time I spent on this mind map, though, the more doodles, sketches, and illustrations started to appear. You see, I've always been the kind of student that liked to draw on the margins of a notebook, often getting told off for it. But in this case, I noticed that my so-called bad habit was helping me. I realized here that my drawings weren't just symbolic of the words on the mind map, but they were connecting my mind map in different ways that I'm not too sure if I'd reached if I just stuck to words. The process of exploring positionality isn't new. Reflective drawing isn't new either. But what I didn't come across was anything that talked about the power of combining these things together. And that was my final puzzle piece. The process of simultaneously drawing and writing about my identity helped me to unlock a deeper level of reflection. I used this mind map sketch hybrid to include a personal rationale alongside my academic rationale for my final thesis. I did this to address that I know that my life experiences, identity, and beliefs have an impact on my opinions, thoughts, and views. Those 4 puzzle pieces provide important context to why and how I discovered the power of reflective drawing and writing to unlock that deeper level of reflection. The clearer picture that each piece led to was how big of a role positionality plays in our actions towards decoloniality. Because core to decolonizing education is the need to rethink, reframe, and reconstruct knowledge and practice. So for me, by adding reflective drawing into the mix, I felt like I was rethinking and reframing my approach to exploring positionality. After I completed my master's, I began exploring reflective writing and drawing more, noticing the intersections between all the benefits. This inspired me to think about how I could encourage others to do the same. I knew that whilst drawing felt really comfortable to me, it can feel really new for some. So I needed to come up with a way of encouraging drawing and writing simultaneously that didn't feel super daunting. So here are my 5 short steps to start you off on the big task of using reflective drawing to explore your positionality. You ready? Yes. Step 1, draw 3 things that represent you. The first thing I drew here was a paint palette, paintbrush, and a pencil. The second, a heart surrounded by little stick people holding hands. And the third, a globe and some justice scales. You see, you don't have to be an artist to do this. I decided to draw stick people. Step 2, choose and write down 5 aspects of social identity that you would like to focus on. This could be class, citizenship, ability, age, race, gender identity, education, and many more. I'll share 3 that I chose. I chose to focus on citizenship, gender, and ability. Step 3, write down your unique connection to those aspects. So, for citizenship here, I wrote that I'm a dual citizen of the UK and Sri Lanka. For gender, I wrote that I'm a cisgendered woman. And for ability, I noticed that whilst I'm physically able, I'm neurodivergent, being diagnosed with dyslexia. Step 4, write down how each social identity impacts your life. My dual citizenship means that I can easily travel and work in both countries. What a privilege. But I also struggled with belonging in those communities. You see, I was always the Sri Lankan girl in the UK and the British girl in Sri Lanka. Under being a cisgendered woman, I wrote the words oppression and expectation. And under my ability box, I wrote that I need extra time with spelling, maths, and reading. But I think my dyslexia has aided my creative thinking. Step 5, Now go back to drawing and see what comes to your mind. The first thing I drew here was a crossroads with a little stick figure in the middle. Overlapping that was a paper aeroplane. I then started to draw an eye with long eyelashes, and I realized that my brain had started to connect my Sri Lankan citizenship with being a woman. The long eyelashes started to represent a Sri Lankan beauty standard of having big, beautiful brown eyes. I added to that by attempting to draw a sari with some bright colors. Next, some long, straight hair, because having fair skin and a neatly kept hair is what is deemed beautiful there. Next, I drew a magnifying glass with some words and numbers through it. And then I went back to that paper aeroplane from before, adding a dotted line that weaved in and out of the drawings. This winding made me realize that I didn't want the crossroads I drew at the start to be straight and rigid, but rather a crossroads of windy roads instead. I think this started to connect my physical ability to walk any road, but highlight that the windy truth that my feelings about struggling to belong and the barriers I face with my dyslexia are due to structural inequalities like inequitable education systems, bias, and discrimination. I continued to draw for a while here, reflecting on the pictures I drew at the start, editing and adding words around the page, and making new connections. What I believe this demonstrates is the power of drawing when it comes to reflecting on our identities and positionalities. It quite literally creates a picture of who we are, our privileges, challenges, and the gaps in our knowledge. Connecting this back to decolonizing education, exploring our positionality can help us to better understand the power we hold as educators. So, teachers, lecturers, researchers, I've got a particular call for action for you. If you're trying to decolonize your curriculum, start with you, because you curate it. How does your experiences and perspectives influence your curriculum and research? What's your positionality? And have you tried drawing it yet? You might want to use these steps to start thinking about writing a positionality statement or a personal rationale for your research like I did. For all of you who aren't teachers, I want to remind you that you're all educators. So whilst you might not have the specific aim of decolonizing education, I still think that there's benefit to following these steps because all of our actions and attitudes contribute to shaping a more inclusive and equitable world. Thank you.